All right, ready to dive deep. Today, it's a scandal that shook America. Almost 100 years ago. The Teapot Dome scandal.
You might be thinking, history lesson.
Yeah, but trust me, this one's got twists and turns, secret deals, bribes, even a cabinet member going to prison.
And get this. Before Watergate, this was the biggest political scandal in U.S. history.
So get ready. Your crash course in all things Teapot Dome. How it happened, who was involved, and why it matters even now. Our guide. Excerpts from the Teapot Dome scandal Wikipedia page.
It all started, funny enough, with what seemed like a good idea.
You mean President Taft? Setting aside all that oil land as reserves for the Navy.
Exactly. Fresh off World War I, everyone was worried about fuel for the future, especially for the Navy.
Makes sense. Secure those resources, right?
Taft wanted to be sure the Navy had what it needed, especially with those new oil-powered warships, these reserves, Teapot Dome in Wyoming, Elk Hills, and Buena Vista in California.
Strategic assets. Vital for national security.
Right. But then Harding becomes president.
Uh-oh, here we go.
He moves control of these reserves.
Yeah.
From the Navy to the Department of the Interior. Seemed like a normal move, but
That's where things went wrong.
you could say that.
Yeah.
Leading the Department of the Interior was Albert B. Fall, let's just say. His ambition, well, sometimes it got the better of him.
Our main player enters the scene.
And he doesn't waste any time. Leases out the oil production rights at Teapot Dome to Harry F. Sinclair of Mammoth Oil. Elk Hills goes to Edward L. Doheny of Pan American Petroleum and Transport Company. No competitive bidding.
Wait, what? That's allowed.
It was legal under the Mineral Leasing Act of 1920, but come on, imagine you've got valuable land, worth millions potentially, and you just hand it over to your friends without even seeing if anyone else is interested.
Not exactly transparent.
Not at all.
So what was Fall getting out of this?
Well, Fall's personal finances, they suddenly got a lot better. From Doheny, a so-called loan of $100,000, interest-free, over $1.7 million today.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
And it wasn't all. The investigation found more, about $404,000 in gifts and other payments from Doheny and Sinclair.
Almost $7 million today.
Now, Fall had struggled financially for years. Suddenly, he's living the high life, paying off debts, upgrading his ranch, spending like crazy.
Hard to miss that kind of change.
Like trying to hide an elephant in a bathtub. And someone did notice. Carl McGee, a journalist. He'd go on to found the Albuquerque Tribune. He caught wind of Fall's spending, even brought it to the Senate's attention.
So even before the official scandal broke,
Whispers were starting.
that feeling you get, something's wrong. But you can't quite place it.
Yeah. By April 1922, Senator John B. Kendrick introduced a resolution calling for an investigation. He'd got a letter from a worried Wyoming oil operator. That was enough to get things going.
But it wasn't until March of the next year that the Senate really launched an investigation into Teapot Dome, led by Republican Senator Robert M. La Follette.
Now, at first, La Follette thought Fall was innocent, but then his Senate office was ransacked.
Seriously, someone broke in.
While they were investigating this potential scandal,
I'm talking about suspicious.
we can't say for sure who did it, but it definitely raised suspicion on Fall and the whole thing.
And then there was Democratic Senator Thomas J. Walsh. He wouldn't let it go.
2 years, relentless investigation, roadblocks and dead ends everywhere.
What was he up against?
Walsh was thorough, missing documents, witnesses dodging questions, you name it. He was determined to untangle this web of corruption, no matter how long it took.
But here's the thing. The leases themselves,
Yeah.
not technically illegal, so proving wrongdoing.
Well, it was clever. They exploited loopholes,
Yeah.
stayed just within the law, at least on the surface. Imagine someone rigs a game, but they don't break any of the written rules. Legal? Maybe. Ethical? Fair?
Not really. That gray area.
Exactly.
So how did Walsh break through? Expose what was really going on?
Remember that loan Doheny gave Fall?
Yeah.
That supposed act of generosity? $100,000. That was the key. Walsh uncovered the truth, and it became the smoking gun.
So that's how it all came out.
One small detail, unraveling the whole thing.
What happened next? Did anyone face consequences?
Oh, the fallout was huge. The Supreme Court stepped in, declared the Teapot Dome and Elk Hills leases corrupt, returned the oil reserves to the Navy. A powerful message. Even government officials aren't above the law.
What about Fall, the mastermind?
He couldn't get out of this one. Fall was found guilty, accepting bribes, sentenced to prison, first U.S. cabinet member imprisoned, for a felony while in office.
They actually put him behind bars.
They did.
What about Doheny, the one who paid the bribe?
Here's where it gets ironic. Doheny was acquitted of bribing Fall, walked away a free man.
So the guy who pays the bribe is fine, and the guy who takes it goes to prison.
One of the strange twists. And it gets worse. Doheny's company, they foreclosed on Fall's home because of those unpaid loans.
No way. So he took his house too.
It's a messed up story.
What about Sinclair, the other oil tycoon?
Sinclair didn't get off completely. He served 6 months, but not for bribery, for jury tamper.
Jury tamper.
Trying to influence the trial. It shows how deep this went. Not just one bad apple. A whole system. Powerful people breaking the rules.
Look at their own gain.
Exact.
What about President Harding? Was he involved?
Harding himself wasn't directly involved, but his reputation took a hit because of his association with Fall and the others. He died in office before the full extent of the scandal came out.
Guilty by association.
In a way.
So beyond the immediate fallout, what lasting impact did this have on American politics? Did anything change?
Oh, absolutely. Teapot Dome wasn't just a big news story. It had a huge impact on how we view government and hold our leaders accountable. It led to important legal and political reforms that are still in effect today.
So this scandal from almost 100 years ago is still shaping our government today.
It is.
Give me some examples. How did Teapot Dome change things for the better?
One of the biggest outcomes. The Supreme Court affirmed Congress's power to compel testimony. That came out of the McGrain v. Daugherty case, directly related to Teapot Dome.
So Congress can force people to testify.
Even if they're hiding something. A major victory for transparency and government oversight. And there's more. Congress also gained the power to subpoena tax records.
That's huge.
Being able to access financial records is key to uncovering corruption. Following the money trail, and it didn't stop there. The Federal Corrupt Practices Act, that regulates campaign finance, it was strengthened in direct response to the scandal.
Trying to prevent future scandals.
Exactly. Teapot Dome was a wake-up call. It led to reforms to stop history from repeating itself. It showed even the highest levels of government aren't immune to corruption.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, but one last thing I'm curious about. What happened to the Teapot Dome oil field itself?
That's where things take an unexpected turn. After the scandal, the oil field sat idle for almost 50 years.
Like a reminder of what happened there.
But then in 1976,
it went back into production. And not just symbolically. It generated over $569 million. For the government,
from corruption to revenue,
it is a bit of poetic justice. And in 2015, the Department of Energy sold it for $45 million, closing that chapter in American history.
From scandal to silence to revenue to a quiet sale. Quite a journey.
This has been quite a deep dive already. Presidential decisions, corrupt officials, backroom deals, and a senator who wouldn't give up. It's a story filled with intrigue and lessons for today.
It is, and as we go forward, it's important to remember the fight against corruption never ends. Teapot Dome is a powerful reminder of what happens when those in power put personal gain above the public good.
Absolutely. So what's next? Where do we go from here?
We've explored the scandal and its immediate impact. But the real question is, what does Teapot Dome mean today? How do modern political scandals compare to this?
I'm ready to go deeper. Let's see how the lessons from Teapot Dome help us understand current events and navigate power, ethics, and accountability in the 21st century. It's wild, right? A scandal from so long ago still feels relevant.
It's like a yardstick to measure modern political scandals against.
So using Teapot Dome as the benchmark, what scandals stand out today? What parallels do you see?
The first one, gotta be Watergate, often considered. The scandal that knocked Teapot Dome off the top spot as the biggest in U.S. history.
Right. The break-in, the cover-up, the Nixon tapes.
Like Teapot Dome, it involved a president, though not directly. In Watergate's case, Nixon wasn't in on the break-in. But covering it up, that sealed his fate.
It's crazy how a break-in at a hotel can lead to a president resigning.
It shows even the most powerful can't escape consequences. It also shows how important a free press is, and checks and balances without journalists digging and the courts holding people accountable. Who knows how long it would have gone on?
I can't take those things for granted.
Absolutely not. But there's a difference. Teapot Dome and Watergate were both about corruption at the highest levels, but the motives, they were different.
So it wasn't just greed as greed. Something else was going on.
With Teapot Dome, it was personal. Fall was getting rich off those bribes. But Watergate, more about power, staying in control, even if it meant breaking the law.
One was greed. The other was abuse of power for political gain.
Exactly. That's why Watergate had a bigger impact. on American politics. It wasn't just bad people. It made us question the limits of presidential power and how corruption can undermine democracy.
It shook people's faith in government, made us think about how power works and how to hold those in authority accountable.
And it led to more reforms for transparency and ethical standards.
So Watergate was like a consequence of
Yeah.
not learning the lessons of Teapot Dome.
It's like we repeat history unless we learn and take steps to prevent it.
It wasn't just those two, though. There have been so many political scandals.
Oh, yeah. Iran-Contra during the Reagan administration, secret arms deals, funding rebels in Nicaragua, presidential authority, covert operations, big questions there.
And Whitewater during the Clinton years. Real estate investments, allegations of financial issues.
Years of investigations, a special prosecutor, no charges against the Clintons, but it showed the potential for conflict of interest when personal finances and public office mix.
And then there's the Trump administration.
So many investigations, obstruction of justice, campaign finance, conflicts of interest.
Every week it felt like a new scandal.
That constant stream of scandals. The 237 News, social media, makes you wonder, has our view of scandals changed?
Good question. Are we desensitized or holding leaders to a higher standard?
It's probably both. We see so many scandals, it's easy to get numb. Like, it's just how politics is.
We start to expect it almost.
Information is more accessible now. The internet, social media, makes it harder to hide things.
Stuff spreads so fast now.
And that gives citizens power to demand accountability.
So Teapot Dome's legacy lives on, not just in the reforms, but in the conversation about corruption, accountability, a vigilant public.
It shows us the temptation for power abuse is always there.
Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
We need systems to prevent that, to expose wrongdoing, hold people accountable.
Have we learned from Teapot Dome and Watergate? Or will we make the same mistakes?
Each generation has to answer that. But we can't be complacent. We have to be vigilant, demand transparency, hold leaders to high standards.
It's not just about the politicians. It's all of us being involved, staying informed, speaking out.
Democracy takes work from all of us. We have to protect our institutions, make sure government serves the people.
Being informed, engaged, speaking up against injustice, no matter what.
In realizing fighting corruption never ends, we need vigilance and a commitment to ethics in every part of public life.
Okay, so it's a marathon, not a sprint. But where do we go from here? How do we use these lessons for today's challenges?
We have to understand why corruption happens. Why do people abuse power? What leads to this?
Punishing people isn't enough. We need to understand why it keeps happening.
We need a multi-pronged approach, stronger ethical standards in government, more transparency, accountability, and empower citizens.
Create a culture of ethics and integrity where doing the right thing matters and wrongdoing is dealt with quickly.
And this isn't just government, it's about ethics in everything. Business, education, our personal life.
We all have to act with integrity, hold each other accountable.
And that's a lesson as relevant today as it was back during Teapot Dome.
History is a good teacher. It can guide us through our own complex times.
So, as we end this part, here's something to think about. How do we make sure we don't forget the lessons of Teapot Dome as individuals, as a society?
That's a good question. I think it starts with each of us asking ourselves, what can we do in our own lives to promote integrity, accountability, commitment to the common good? We've really gone deep, haven't we? Explored all the twists and turns of Teapot Dome, even compared it to, well, some of the biggest scandals in modern politics. But I'm still thinking about something. Why does this story, almost 100 years old, why does it still matter today?
It's the question, isn't it? More than just a fascinating story from the past. Teapot Dome, it's like a mirror. We can look at ourselves in it. How we deal with power, corruption, accountability. Makes you wonder, are we any better today at dealing with these problems than they were back then?
That's what I'm wondering, too. It feels like every time period has its own scandals.
Yeah.
So have we made any real progress? I mean, in preventing abuses of power like this?
It's complicated. On the one hand, yeah, we've got reforms. Since Teapot Dome, remember what we talked about earlier? The Federal Corrupt Practices Act was strengthened. Congress got subpoena power. The Supreme Court backed up Congress's right to investigate. All direct responses to the scandal, making it harder for corruption to take root at the highest levels of government.
So we basically plugged some of those holes that allowed for such blatant corruption.
Right. But systems and laws, they're only part of it. The other part is people, citizens who are informed and vigilant. Back in the 1920s, it was journalists like Carl McGee He was the one who noticed Falls, his sudden wealth. That's what got the ball rolling. Public pressure pushed the Senate to investigate.
We can't just rely on the government to keep itself in check.
Nope. It's up to all of us, the people, to hold our leaders accountable, to speak up when things are wrong, to demand transparency.
And how are we doing on that front?
Well, there's good and bad. The good news is we've got more information than ever. Internet, social media, wrongdoing can't stay hidden as easily.
It all comes out eventually.
Citizens have more power than ever to investigate, expose things, demand accountability.
We can fact-check politicians right as they're speaking, share information, organize movements, all so much faster than before.
The downside is all this information can be overwhelming, leads to, well, apathy, cynicism. It's like we get numb to it. Another scandal, just another day in politics.
Yeah, I get that. And then there's misinformation, fake news. People don't trust the traditional sources anymore. It's hard to know what's real, what to believe, how to form an opinion, how to judge our leaders.
You're right. More tools, yes. But new challenges, too, in this
Yeah.
this crazy information world.
Right.
And staying involved in the fight against corruption.
Sounds like she's got these new, powerful tools, but we're still learning how to use them.
And that's where Teapot Dome comes in. It's a lesson. It tells us fighting corruption. It's an ongoing thing. You need to be paying attention. Willing to question authority.
Right.
And hold people accountable, no matter their politics.
It's about remembering our leaders. They work for us, the people. We have a right and a duty to hold them to the highest standards.
And corruption isn't always obvious. It's not just backroom deals. It can be hidden. Loopholes, conflicts of interest, lack of transparency. We have to pay attention to those subtle ways power can be misused.
Yeah.
And demand better.
From those who represent us.
Exactly. And it's bigger than just politicians or individual scandals. It's about a culture of ethics, of integrity in everything, our public life.
A society where doing the right thing isn't just the rule, it's what we value, where people in power are held responsible, where justice and the common good come first.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, this look into Teapot Dome, I'm curious, what's your biggest takeaway from all this?
I think for me, it's a feeling of responsibility. Sure, we've come a long way since Teapot Dome, but this fight, the fight against corruption, it's not over. We have to stay vigilant, stay involved, and stick to those ethical principles, ourselves and those we put in power.
Well put. And to everyone listening out there, here's our challenge to you. Don't just sit back and watch. Be a part of it. Get involved in the political process. Stay informed. Ask the hard questions and hold those leaders accountable, because the future of our democracy depends on it.
It's been an amazing journey, this deep dive into the Teapot Dome scandal. Learned a lot, I hope you have too, and maybe feeling a bit inspired to keep exploring these big ideas, power, ethics, accountability. In our world today, thanks for joining us.